Well, the homeboys sang a song to praise about the golden days in the healing game.
Best place to be. An Englishman here. In terms of this particular story, it's a bit like intruding on private grief. There's such an introspection here over what this means for for the future of the sport, for national identity, all that sort of stuff, and it's right royally entertaining, I can tell you.
Oh, absolutely, but they've only got themselves to blame.
Oh, 100%. I mean, they broke the cardinal rule. They got caught, and as you discussed, this has been going on time immemorial. But it was so brazen. It was premeditated, and that's most importantly of all, they got caught doing it.
Do you think as well, although, I mean, it has always gone on and what have you, but the manner in which they did that within the focus that there is from television and everything else these days, that these guys now begin to think they're untouchable in some ways, but obviously even detached from the Aussie fans that they really have always had such a connection with in the past.
Very much so. I mean, the captaincy of the Australian cricket team, as I'm sure you know, is sort of up there with the Prime Minister here in terms of the importance of a national office. And the funny thing was that Steve Smith was slightly a throwback to previous captains who've really engaged with the Australian public, people like Ricky Ponting and Steve Waugh. Michael Clarke was never loved. He still isn't. He was seen as too much of a brand. He just assumed the office. It hadn't sort of worked his way towards it. Whereas Steve Smith was slightly going back towards that, someone who worked really hard, a really gritty individual. But David Warner, his assistant, you can see now the explosion of reaction to how unpopular he is. His own teammates don't like him. Certainly, Cricket Australia hates him, let alone his opponents. And I think that's the sort of the key to it. That you're absolutely right. There's been a growing dislocation between the public here and that leadership of that team. And the problem for them is that Darren Lehmann, still in situ, is indelibly linked with that. He's part of the culture that yes, it delivered the Ashes and yes, it's delivered some success, but there's this explosion of anger which has led to these incredible bans. Is not just about this particular issue. It's a sort of growing sense that the Australian cricket team was starting to get more than above itself. It sort of regarded itself as untouchable and the arbiters of what is allowed to go on a cricket pitch.
Tom, what's more laughable, the fact that anyone that knows the game of cricket would believe James Sutherland's explanation that only 3 batsmen knew about this ball tampering, or that James Sutherland can keep his position? Surely he's made Australia look even more ridiculous and incredible in this situation.
There's been a lot of talk over James Sutherland's future for a long time. He's been in situ for a long time, and whether he is the right man to lead Australian cricket. Absolutely, he has not covered himself in glory at all with this whole thing of not using the word cheat to this thing, that the idea that there's three people knew. I mean, frankly, as someone who played club cricket, as a bowler, if I hadn't spotted that there was something wrong with the ball, I shouldn't have been playing. The idea that the international class fast bowlers wouldn't go, hold on a minute, why is this ball suddenly boomeranging this way? And look at the condition and see that it's deteriorating on, still green outfields. Of course, the whole world doesn't believe this. And the beautiful thing about that, from an outsider's point of view, is it just means the story keeps going and going.
Well, it will keep going. And should Darren Lehmann, is he waiting to be sacked, or should he have resigned?
Well, there's all sorts of theories about that, including, as I mentioned, the fact that James Sutherland didn't use the word cheat, clearly on legal advice, as if there's some sort of process going on in the background. His position is not tenable because he's been criticised by so many Australian greats that there is an expectation now that he's on borrowed time. And obviously, it's a bit like a football coach. Once you get into that zone, then it's a question of when, not if.
Do they ever get forgiven?
Oh, Steve Smith will be. He'll be rehabilitated, no doubt. He'll do his ban, and obviously the further ban on being a captain. And he is, I think, by all accounts, a good man who was misguided, made a terrible mistake and a shocking error of judgment. And as someone who sort of knows that dressing room quite well said to me the other day that you could see the pressures of captaincy and the expectations got to him, that he was not mentally the bloke who had assumed that role and who had been batting in essentially a carefree manner for years. And going back to what I said before, the focus on the captaincy is such that it really does consume your life. And he made an error of judgment, but I don't think Warner will ever play for Australia again. The fact that he has been seen as the instigator of it, and he'll become the lightning rod for all that dissatisfaction that I mentioned, and I don't think that he will be forgiven. Cameron Bancroft, it all depends on what he does when he returns in terms of state cricket and scoring runs. I mean, he could just go down as a footnote in history. I would expect to see Steve Smith back in the side, but not David Warner.
And Tom, the Australian cricket summer is about 4 or 5 months away. Which grade teams will gamble on them? Will anyone take them?
Well, as far as I know, they can't until until this ban is served. From what
they've been told they can play club cricket, haven't they?
Yeah, which is essentially, I mean, it's obviously of a very good standard, and they'll have to do that to keep their eye on and avoid, losing everything completely. But there'll be, certainly for Steve Smith, there'll be people queuing up for him. But the fallout for David Warner has been such that, when his own teammates are now telling Cricket Australia basically to remove him from the whole scenario because they're so angry at what's unfolded. Anyone who is looking at him is going to be very wary of what effect he will have on a team environment.
Sing it out loud, sing it out loud, sing it in your name, sing it in your name, sing it like you're proud, sing it like you're proud, sing the healing game, sing the healing game.